Hi, I'm David, and I'm joined by Sophia. Welcome, everyone, to TechDaily.ai. Just a quick note before we start, you can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, contact info@techdaily.ai to get started today. Okay, so today we are taking a look at the global landscape of young innovators, and specifically, the systemic barriers that just prevent massive amounts of talent from reaching their potential. We're talking everyone from displaced persons to individuals with disabilities.
Exactly. And the whole point of this really is to connect the dots. We need to explore the very specific challenges that young social entrepreneurs are facing all over the world. And then we can connect those struggles back to this fundamental economic need, which is how do we find and develop the next generation of leaders in science, technology, engineering, and math?
Regardless of their background.
Regardless of their background, because we talk a lot about innovation, but we often just overlook the sheer number of talented people who are being actively blocked by, policy or financial bias or just social stigma.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're talking about more than just needing good ideas. These are structural problems.
Yes, absolutely. And the discrimination, it almost never happens in isolation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we see this phenomenon called compounding marginalization. So you might be dealing with a physical disability, which is a barrier on its own.
Right.
But then you layer on, say, an ethnic minority status and then maybe a specific gender identity. And all of those factors, they just stack up. They multiply the difficulty.
And often just where you happen to live is a barrier in itself.
Absolutely. Geographical exclusion is a huge one. The urban-rural divide. I mean, it basically dictates who gets access to everything, from basic infrastructure to digital resources.
So your starting line is just different depending on your zip code.
Completely different. And that's before you even get to the economic deprivation side, which limits access to good education, good healthcare, the basic building blocks for any entrepreneur.
And then on top of all that, you have these huge macro shocks, things like climate disasters or political conflicts.
And those can displace entire communities. Think about it. They lose their networks, their assets, their whole professional history, really overnight. The system just isn't built to recognize what they had before.
To really get into how deep these gaps go, you've mentioned this 80AQ framework.
Yes. Availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality. It's a really useful lens.
So let's use it to look at finance, because that seems to be the universal bottleneck.
It really is. And this is where the framework shows its power. When we talk about availability, sure, a big bank might be available in the city, but its loan products are almost never accessible to marginalized entrepreneurs. They want high credit scores, they want collateral, things that just exclude anyone without generational wealth.
So the money is there, but the rules to get it are exclusionary by design.
Exactly. And that's where acceptability comes in, too. The financial gatekeepers often don't accept a non-traditional business model. They don't see the potential. And on top of that, there's a huge awareness gap about alternatives like microfinance or crowdfunding.
Which sounds a policy problem, too. What about the regulatory side?
It's another huge hurdle. The registration processes are so complex. The licensing is opaque. If you're already struggling with, literacy or poverty, all that bureaucracy is just another way for the system to say no.
And then there's the cultural side, the human capital aspect. This is where the more subtle biases live, I assume.
Oh, definitely. Cultural biases, stereotypes. They actively hold back ventures led by women, by ethnic minorities, by LGBTI plus entrepreneurs. These are invisible barriers, and they cut off access to mentorship, to networks.
It also means the quality of support isn't there.
Precisely. The support that is available just isn't tailored to help these groups overcome that specific, deep-seated prejudice.
We should probably zero in on the rural entrepreneurs for a second, because the needs of someone in the countryside are just completely different from someone building an app in a major city.
It's a different world. Rural youth are often focused on things like the agri-food sector. They have less access to digital resources, lower literacy sometimes. The cookie-cutter solutions from urban centers just don't work.
So a co-working space isn't the answer.
No, not at all. They need specialized on-site incubation, and we have to think beyond just simple grants.
Right. It can't just be philanthropy forever.
Exactly. You need a combined model. You start with grants to de-risk the venture, but you have to transition to loans or equity or royalties. That's how you build a sustainable business.
This all paints a pretty tough picture, but what really brings it to life is the resilience of the people fighting back. So let's shift and look at some of these stories, starting with the case from the Philippines, Arides style.
Yes, Jal Mastari, A young Maranao entrepreneur, he started his social enterprise after the 2017 Marawi siege, which just devastated the city. His mission was to restore livelihoods for displaced single mothers.
And he ran into challenges that were purely about his identity.
Right. Immediately. Even 2 years after the conflict, the stigma of being a displaced Maranao person was so intense. So intense they couldn't even rent office space in nearby cities. Landlords just saw them as unacceptable.
Wow, that's deeply unfair. So how do you innovate your way past that kind of social barrier?
You use your culture as your strength. Array's style creates these beautiful fashion accessories using lankit, a traditional Maranao weave. It celebrates their culture, it creates a high-quality product, and it restores dignity and income.
And when the pandemic hit, they didn't go to a bank.
No, they couldn't. They turned to the community. They successfully crowdfunded over 100,000 Philippine pesos, which is about $1,800. It shows that where traditional finance fails, community can step in.
Let's move to Thailand now. The story of Friendly Dev, which is just... It's such an example of overt discrimination.
It really is. This is Wasan Pangpunju's story. Wasan has a visual impairment, and he founded a company that designs accessible websites. Think voice activation, color contrast. Really important work.
And he went to get a loan to expand.
He did. He offered his house, his cars, significant collateral. And he was just outright denied.
Wait, he had the assets. On what grounds was he denied?
The bank officer told him explicitly that he held the assumption that visually impaired people could only sell lottery tickets or work as masseurs.
That's shocking.
It had nothing to do with risk assessment. It was pure, unadulterated bias.
And the barriers didn't stop there.
No.
He ran into a policy failure, too.
Yes. Another perfect example. Thailand has this disability-inclusive public procurement clause. It's supposed to give government contracts to organizations that employ disabled persons. It's a great policy on paper. He couldn't use it because, and this is a direct quote, the policy was not well known amongst government staff. So this amazing tool was just useless because of a lack of training and awareness.
The tool is there, but nobody knows how to use it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at Japan. Katsuki Ono of Equal Frontiers. He's fighting these attitudinal barriers differently.
He is. Katsuki, who is an entrepreneur with disabilities, challenges the perception of capability every single day. He shows that accommodations aren't deficits. They're just adjustments for success.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, for example, he might request extra time to respond via text during a Q&A, or he'll present a pitch using a video.
And that transparency actually educates his clients.
Precisely. By being open about what he needs, he's showing these big companies how simple and effective these accommodations are. He's not just running a business, he's changing the workplace culture.
Our final case from Sri Lanka, Fawaz Kurvep, seems to tie this whole idea of compounding marginalization together.
He really does. Fawaz is a Tamil Muslim youth entrepreneur in a Sinhalese majority country. He moves to the capital to launch his ed tech business and immediately hits barriers. Age, ethnicity.
And the language barrier was a huge one.
Staggering. Sri Lanka technically has an official languages law, but it wasn't enforced. So he had to teach himself Sinhala and English just to do basic business with the state. He was forced to do the work the state should have been doing.
And he even changed his appearance to fight the stigma.
Yes. Think about the weight of that. To counter the stereotype of a young tech person being unqualified, he deliberately grew a beard to look more mature, more serious. His entire identity had to be adjusted just to get in the door.
These stories, they're so powerful, and they just highlight this undeniable truth. These barriers are preventing a massive amount of talent from being mobilized.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to connect this fight for inclusion, this systemic failure, to the bigger picture. The need for STEM talent right here in the U.S.
This is such a crucial pivot. Because a nation's long-term prosperity, its security, it all relies so heavily on a strong pipeline of domestic STEM innovators. The U.S. has historically imported a lot of talent, but global competition is getting fierce.
And the data suggests we're falling behind. What are some of the metrics?
They're pretty sobering. If you look at the 2006 PISA test, U.S. 15-year-olds in the 90th percentile. So our absolute top students scored below their peers in 29 other countries in math.
29. Wow.
We're just not competing at the highest level globally. And what's worse, we're seeing a decline in interest from our brightest students internally.
How so?
Between 1992 and 2000, the number of top-achieving U.S. students who planned to go into science and engineering graduate study dropped 8%. The drop in engineering was 25%. We aren't inspiring or challenging our best students.
It sounds like we have this massive pool of potential innovators that we're just missing. Where are we overlooking them?
There are two major gaps. The first is the equity gap. Talented students from low-income and underrepresented minority backgrounds. They are just routinely unrecognized. They lose ground at every single stage of their K-12 schooling.
And why is that? It's not motivation.
No, it's purely systemic. They don't have access to the same quality of mentorship, the high-level AP or IB courses, the resources you need to sustain advanced learning. The potential is lost before college even enters the picture.
And the second gap is even more structural. It's about how we measure ability in the first place.
Exactly. This is the spatial ability gap. Future success in STEM isn't just about math and verbal skills, which we test constantly. It's also strongly linked to spatial ability.
Okay, so define spatial ability for us.
It's the capacity to generate, retain, and transform visual images in your mind. Think of an architect, a mechanical engineer, a surgeon. That skill is absolutely vital for them, but we almost never measure it.
And if we don't measure it, we can't find the students who are good at it. How big is the missed opportunity here?
It's enormous. Our current math and verbal tests, they miss a staggering 70% of students who score in the top 1% on spatial ability tests.
70%.
Just imagine that loss of potential. We're excluding the person who struggles with rote algebra, but can perfectly visualize a complex machine in 3 dimensions.
Even though we know that skill predicts success.
We know it. The data is clear. 90% of STEM doctorate holders scored in the top quartile of spatial ability when they were teenagers. We're just not looking for one of the most predictive indicators we have.
So if the system is failing at the equity level and the measurement level, what does that mean for our schools? How do we start to fix this?
Well, first, we have to recognize that our most talented students often master 40 to 50% of the curriculum before the school year even begins.
They're bored.
They're bored. They need acceleration and enrichment to avoid just checking out. If you bore a talented kid, you risk losing them for good.
So this requires more than just the standard textbook approach.
It requires formal and informal programs working together. Things like robotics clubs, math circles, hands-on lab days, things that foster creative problem solving and those spatial skills.
And this has to be a policy issue.
It has to be. We need consistent policies on differentiated instruction and curriculum acceleration, and a student's high ability needs to be formally recognized when they move between schools. Their potential can't be left to chance.
So what we've seen today is that whether you're an indigenous entrepreneur in the Philippines, a web designer with a visual impairment in Thailand, or a low-income student here in the U.S., the fight for recognition is universal.
It is. The systemic failures that deny capital to an entrepreneur are the very same failures that prevent us from identifying the next great STEM student.
The synthesis here seems really clear.
It is. True equality means addressing the needs of all students, and that includes high-ability learners. The National Science Board argues that we should hold schools accountable for the performance of their very top students, say the top 10%, just as much as we hold them accountable for raising the floor for low achievers.
Because we value what we measure.
We value what we measure. And if we fail to measure potential in all its different forms, we are failing our own future.
So considering all this, the global evidence of discrimination and the national data showing we're failing to develop talent, if the U.S. truly aims to lead the world in innovation, how quickly can we implement systemic changes like mandatory assessment of spatial ability or portable merit-based scholarships to ensure that the next Albert Einstein or Marie Curie isn't simply being missed because they live in a rural town or don't fit our current, very narrow definition of smart?